In all, there are 4 states of consciousness possible for man. He emphasised the word man. But ordinary man, that is, man number 1, number 2 and number 3, lives in the 2 lowest states of consciousness only. The 2 higher states of consciousness are inaccessible to him, and although he may have flashes of these states, he is unable to understand them, and he judges them from the point of view of those states in which it is usual for him to be. The 2 usual, that is, the lowest, states of consciousness are first, sleep, in other words, a passive state in which man spends a third and very often a half of his life. And second, the state in which men spend the other part of their lives, in which they walk the streets, write books, talk on lofty subjects, take part in politics, kill one another, which they regard as active, and call clear consciousness, or the waking state of consciousness. The term clear consciousness, or waking state of consciousness, seems to have been given in jest, especially when you realise what clear consciousness ought in reality to be, and what the state in which man lives and acts really is. The 3rd state of consciousness is self-remembering, or self-consciousness, or consciousness of one's being. It is usual to consider that we have this state of consciousness, or that we can have it if we want to. Our science and philosophy have overlooked the fact that we do not possess this state of consciousness, and that we cannot create it in ourselves by decision or desire alone. The 4th state of consciousness is called the objective state of consciousness. In this state, a man can see things as they are. Flashes of this state of consciousness also occur in man. In the religions of all nations, there are indications of the possibility of a state of consciousness of this kind, which is called enlightenment, and various other names, but which cannot be described in words. But the only right way to objective consciousness is through the development of self-consciousness. If an ordinary man is artificially brought into a state of objective consciousness, and afterwards brought back to his usual state, he will remember nothing, and he will think that for a time he had lost consciousness. But in the state of self-consciousness, a man can have flashes of objective consciousness and remember them. The 4th state of consciousness in man means an altogether different state of being. It is the result of inner growth and of long and difficult work on oneself. But the 3rd state of consciousness constitutes the natural right of man as he is, and if man does not possess it, it is only because of the wrong conditions of his life. It can be said without any exaggeration that at the present time the 3rd state of consciousness occurs in man only in the form of very rare flashes, and that it can be made more or less permanent in him only by means of special training. For most people, even for educated and thinking people, the chief obstacle in the way of acquiring self-consciousness consists in the fact that they think they possess it, that is, that they possess self-consciousness and everything connected with it. Individuality in the sense of a permanent and unchangeable I, will, ability to do, and so on. It is evident that a man will not be interested if you tell him that he can acquire by long and difficult work something which, in his opinion, he already has. On the contrary, he will think either that you are mad, or that you want to deceive him with a view to personal gain. The 2 higher states of consciousness, self-consciousness and objective consciousness, are connected with the functioning of the higher centres in man. In addition to those centres of which we have so far spoken, there are 2 other centres in man, the higher emotional and the higher thinking. These centres are in us, they are fully developed and are working all the time, but their work fails to reach our ordinary consciousness. The cause of this lies in the special properties of our so-called clear consciousness. In order to understand what the difference between states of consciousness is, let us return to the 1st state of consciousness, which is sleep. This is an entirely subjective state of consciousness. A man is immersed in dreams. Whether he remembers them or not does not matter. Even if some real impressions reach him, such as sounds, voices, warmth, cold, the sensation of his own body, they arouse in him only fantastic subjective images. Then a man wakes up. At first glance, this is a quite different state of consciousness. He can move, he can talk with other people, he can make calculations ahead, he can see danger and avoid it, and so on. It stands to reason that he is in a better position than when he was asleep. But if we go a little more deeply into things, if we take a look into his inner world, into his thoughts, into the causes of his actions, we shall see that he is in almost the same state as when he is asleep. And it is even worse, because in sleep he is passive, that is, he cannot do anything. In the waking state, however, he can do something all the time, and the results of all his actions will be reflected upon him or upon those around him. And yet he does not remember himself. He is a machine. Everything with him happens. He cannot stop the flow of his thoughts. He cannot control his imagination, his emotions, his attention. He lives in a subjective world of I love, I do not love, I like, I do not like, I want, I do not want. That is, of what he thinks he likes, of what he thinks he does not like, of what he thinks he wants, of what he thinks he does not want. He does not see the real world. The real world is hidden from him by the wall of imagination. He lives in sleep. He is asleep. What is called clear consciousness is sleep, and a far more dangerous sleep than sleep at night in bed.